Spain's cultural suicide? The immigration gamble Europe cannot ignore. Not long ago, in another episode, I asked a simple question. Europe, what are you doing? Today, I want to ask that question again, but this time, I'm looking at Spain, a country with one of the richest cultures in Europe, a country of Cervantes, Velázquez, flamenco, ancient towns, regional identities, Catholic heritage, secular modernity, and a language spoken across continents. And a country now carrying out one of the largest migrant regularization programs in recent European history. Is Spain renewing itself, or is it committing cultural suicide? Before anyone reaches for the easiest accusation, let me make something clear. I am not opposed to immigration. When I visited Spain with my family, we were served by men from Morocco and Paraguay. They spoke Spanish, communicated in English, worked legally, behaved professionally, and treated us with kindness. That is not a threat to Spain. That is successful immigration. A person arrives legally, works, learns the language, respects the law, contributes to society, and gradually becomes part of the country. The problem begins when immigration stops being a managed process and becomes a substitute for borders, demographic policy, labor reform, and political courage. I remember videos from several years ago showing boats reaching beaches in southern Spain. Groups of young men jumped out and ran inland. Those images disturbed me. But images are not statistics. A dramatic video can show something real while still failing to describe the whole population. The current Spanish debate is much broader than boats from Africa. In fact, most applicants in Spain's new regularization program come from Central and South America. That matters because immigration into Spain is not one single phenomenon. It includes legal workers, asylum seekers, descendants of Spanish immigrants, undocumented laborers already working in the informal economy, families, students, criminals, victims of trafficking, and people who simply want a better life. A serious state must distinguish between them. A propaganda slogan does not. So what has Spain actually done? On the 16th of April 2026, the government opened an extraordinary regularization process for foreign nationals already living in Spain without full legal status, as well as certain applicants for international protection. Applicants generally had to show that they were in Spain before the 1st of January 2026 and that they had remained there continuously for 5 months. Admission of an application allowed temporary residence and work while the case was processed. Successful applicants could receive a renewable 1-year residence and work permit. The government initially expected around 500,000 applications. By the end of June, it had received 1,174,978. That is not a minor administrative adjustment. That is a policy affecting a population larger than many European cities. And it is entirely reasonable to ask whether Spain's administration, housing market, schools, healthcare system, and police were prepared for that scale. The government says the measure brings people out of the shadows, allows them to work legally, and turns informal workers into taxpayers. That argument is not absurd. By the end of June, well over 159,000 people linked to the process had already entered the Social Security system. Regularization can reduce exploitation, make wages visible, and prevent employers from using undocumented workers as an illegal source of cheap labor. But there is another side. If a government repeatedly regularizes enormous numbers of people after they arrive illegally or overstay, it risks sending a message that the legal route is slower and less rewarding than entering first and waiting for the next political decision. Compassion without credibility can become an incentive, and borders that exist only on paper are not humane borders. They are an invitation to smugglers. One claim from the political interview that inspired this episode requires an important correction. It was suggested that criminals could simply pass through the regularization process. The official rules do require criminal record certificates from Spain and from countries where the applicant previously lived. Applicants must not be considered a threat to public order or national security. A recent Supreme Court decision did reject automatic refusal based solely on the existence of a criminal record in certain residence categories, especially where family rights must be considered. That means individual assessment. It does not mean that criminal history has become irrelevant. And it does not mean that every criminal is automatically entitled to remain. This distinction matters. A government can be criticized without inventing a rule that does not exist. The demographic scale is real. At the beginning of 2025, more than 19% of Spain's population had been born abroad. By April of 2026, Spain's total population was close to 49,700,000. Spain is approaching the point at which 1 resident in 5 was born outside the country. Some people hear that figure and celebrate diversity. Others hear it and fear displacement. Both emotional reactions are understandable. But the responsible question is not whether foreigners are good or bad. The responsible question is whether the pace of change exceeds the country's ability to integrate people into a shared civic culture. A passport is a legal document. A nation is more than a document. It includes language, memory, habits, law, loyalty, mutual obligation, and a willingness to accept that the host country is not merely an economic platform. Integration must mean that Spanish law takes priority over clan authority, religious pressure, and imported customs that violate individual liberty. Equality between women and men is not negotiable. Freedom of belief includes the freedom to reject religion. Forced marriage, female genital mutilation, honor violence, and intimidation have no cultural exemption. A tolerant society does not have to tolerate intolerance, but the same principle applies in the opposite direction. A Moroccan worker is not responsible for every crime committed by another Moroccan. A Muslim child is not a political program. A foreign accent is not evidence of disloyalty. If Spain replaces naive multiculturalism with collective suspicion, it will damage itself differently. What do the economic facts show? Spain has a serious demographic problem. Its fertility rate is close to 1.1 children per woman, far below the level required to replace the population. The country is aging. Employers report shortages in agriculture, tourism, hospitality, construction, domestic work, and care for elderly people. Immigrants are generally younger and more economically active. According to the OECD, labor force participation among immigrants reached almost 70%, compared with less than 58% among native workers. Around 2/3 of migrants find employment within a year of arrival. Migration has supported Spanish growth and helped fill jobs that the economy needs. So the claim that immigrants simply arrive, collect benefits, and contribute nothing is false. But the opposite fairy tale is false too. Non-European migrants have substantially higher unemployment than Spanish nationals. They are concentrated in lower paid and lower productivity sectors. Many are overqualified for the work they perform, while others arrive without the skills the economy requires. Large-scale, low-wage immigration can expand total gross domestic product while leaving gross domestic product per person, housing access, and wage growth much less impressive. A larger economy is not automatically a richer society. If population rises faster than homes, hospitals, transport, and schools, citizens experience growth as overcrowding. The statistics may look excellent in Madrid. The waiting room, rental advertisement, and classroom may tell a different story. That is why the real debate is not immigration versus no immigration. It is controlled, selective, and integrated immigration versus a system that uses population growth to avoid fixing productivity, family policy, housing, and wages. Now, let us address crime honestly. Foreign nationals are overrepresented in Spanish prisons. In early 2025, they represented roughly 1/3 of the prison population, while foreign citizens represented about 1/7 of the population. That gap is serious and should not be hidden. A government that suppresses uncomfortable data creates distrust and leaves the field open to extremists. But prison statistics are not a complete explanation. They do not separate illegal immigration from legal residence. They include different nationalities, ages, and types of offenses. Migrants are often younger and more male than the general population, and those factors affect crime rates in every society. Poverty, unstable employment, organized trafficking, and pre-trial detention also influence prison numbers. The correct response is neither denial nor collective blame. Spain should publish detailed, transparent data by offense, legal status, age, sex, and residency history. Citizens deserve facts. And serious foreign offenders should face firm legal consequences, including deportation where the law permits it, and after due process. A humane migration policy protects migrants from criminals. A serious migration policy protects citizens from criminals. Those principles are not enemies. Public opinion is divided, not unanimous. A national poll published during the regularization debate found that approximately 38% supported the measure, 33% opposed it, and around 1/5 viewed it neutrally. That is not evidence that almost all Spaniards demand open borders. It is also not evidence that almost all Spaniards oppose the program. It shows a country uncertain about the direction in which it is moving. And uncertainty becomes dangerous when political leaders dismiss every concern as racism. People can support legal immigration and still oppose mass regularization. They can welcome workers and still demand border control. They can respect Islam as a religion and still reject political Islam. They can defend refugees and still ask whether an applicant is genuinely fleeing persecution. Those are normal democratic questions. There is another process that must not be confused with migrant regularization. Spain's Democratic Memory Law, adopted in 2022, expanded access to citizenship for descendants of Spanish exiles and emigrants, particularly across Latin America. Well over 2 million applications were submitted, By July of 2026, more than 540,000 people had received Spanish citizenship, and more than 300,000 had been added to the overseas electoral register. This is genuine citizenship with European Union free movement rights. The regularization program is not. A Spanish residence permit allows residence and work in Spain and limited travel within Schengen. It does not automatically permit someone to settle and work anywhere in the European Union. Again, precision matters. Critics accuse Pedro Sanchez and the Socialist Party of manufacturing future voters. The timing, scale, and electoral consequences make suspicion understandable. Sanchez leads a fragile minority government, dependent on smaller parties and surrounded by damaging corruption investigations involving people close to him. But suspicion is not proof. Undocumented migrants receiving temporary residence do not immediately become Spanish voters, and descendants receiving citizenship under the Democratic Memory Law have a legally recognized Spanish family connection. It is possible that some new citizens will favor the socialists. Others may not vote. Others may support conservatives, regional parties, or candidates in their countries of residence. A serious commentator can warn about electoral incentives without presenting an unproven motive as an established conspiracy. Governments must be judged for what they do, not for crimes we imagine they may secretly intend. Bad policy is not automatically a crime against humanity. Political leaders should not be sent to The Hague because we disagree with immigration decisions. They should face parliament, courts, elections, and public accountability. If corruption or other crimes are proven, ordinary criminal law must apply. But international tribunals are not substitutes for democratic argument. Why is Spain politically more progressive than some people expect? Franco matters, but he is not the entire explanation. For almost 4 decades, right-wing authoritarianism was associated with dictatorship, censorship, political imprisonment, centralism, and the close alliance between state and church. After Franco's death, democracy, secularization, and social liberalism became symbols of modernization. That history made parts of Spanish society deeply suspicious of nationalism presented through the language of authority, religion, and national purity. But Spain has not simply been ruled by the left. Conservative governments have held power, and previous mass regularizations also occurred under the center-right government of José María Aznar. Modern Spanish politics is shaped by regional nationalism, urbanization, European integration, generational change, economic inequality, and the memory of civil conflict. The claim that one guilty nation is opening its borders because of Franco or colonial shame is far too simple. So, is Spain committing cultural suicide? Not yet. Spain is not disappearing. Spanish culture remains powerful, confident, and globally influential. Most immigrants in Spain come from societies connected by language, history, or proximity, and many integrate successfully. But Spain is taking a dangerous gamble. If immigration continues at a scale that outpaces housing, infrastructure, law enforcement, and cultural integration, the result may be fragmentation rather than renewal. If temporary regularization becomes an expected reward for illegal entry, border credibility will collapse. If citizenship is expanded without a serious national debate about obligations as well as rights, public trust will collapse. And if politicians tell citizens that every concern is immoral, democratic consent will collapse. That is the real danger, not the existence of foreigners, the destruction of the social contract. A country has the right to decide who enters. A country has the right to require language, work, lawfulness, and civic loyalty. A country has the right to remove people who commit serious crimes and have no legal right to remain. And a country has a duty to treat every human being with dignity while doing all of those things. Spain needs legal immigration connected to real labor needs. It needs secure external borders and faster decisions on asylum. It needs immediate action against smugglers and fraudulent documents. It needs integration standards that defend equality, secular law, and individual freedom. It needs transparent crime and welfare statistics. It needs investment in homes, schools, healthcare, and transport before announcing policies of historic scale. And it requires a clear distinction between residence, permanent settlement, and citizenship. Europe cannot build solidarity by pretending that borders are hatred, and it cannot defend borders by pretending that migrants are less than human. Spain's current policy is not proof of cultural suicide, but it is a warning. A nation that loses control of entry, integration, and citizenship may eventually lose the ability to decide what it is. This is Ollie K. Political. Not long ago, I asked, Europe, what are you doing? Today, Spain has given us part of the answer. The question is whether Europe will recognize the consequences before they become irreversible. Tell me in the comments, is Spain building a stronger society through immigration? Or is it sacrificing long-term cohesion for short-term economic and political convenience? And where should a democratic country draw the line between compassion and self-preservation?